Hi everyone, it's Ileana and I have a couple of cards to share with you today. I am first going to be starting off with this stamp set from Picket and it is called Dose of Vitamin C. I am stamping it onto some Bristol cardstock because I'm going to be using my Arteza markers. I am inking up with some Nocturne ink because it is sticky and it will allow the embossing powder to stick to it. I like to do embossing powder or embossed images when I do my watercolor markers. It helps to keep all of the water or the damp ink in place and not bleed into each other. So I went ahead and heat set that. And one thing you have to consider about the Arteza, I'm not sure if it's changed since then, but there are no numbers or colors. So I created my own swatch sheet so I would be able to tell which colors to pull out. I'm only going to be doing some simple coloring, so I've just pulled out 2 colors and I am going straight to the paper. I have not added any water to this. Now I'm going to take the water brush and I'm going to spread that color around. There's not very much water on the tip of the brush, so it gives you a lot of control, and I'm just pushing it all around. Once I get it blended to where I like it, I'm going to take the marker again and I'm going to add more color. And now because it's damp, it just starts to bleed into the different areas and you get a nice smooth blend. These markers do reactivate even after it is dry, so just keep that in mind if you need to go back and add some more color. Now I'm going to take the other shade that I picked out and I'm just going to work on the belly of the whale and just spread that color around some more. Just remember you can layer your color, so if you let it dry, you can add more color later. I'm going to be using these dies from Birch Press, and these are the waves. I have not used these before, so I'm pulling these out for the first time. I've picked out 3 colors for each plate just so that I could get a little bit of dimension. What I don't realize is that I actually needed a 4th color. So after I adhere all my layers together, which I used a spray adhesive, I used the corner of the MISTI so that each of these layers could line up perfectly. And this is where I determined that I needed to add another color because there is a gap in between. I pull out my swatch of my swatches of my cardstock, and I'm looking to see which one would match the whale and the background paper the most. I am going to move on to the next card. I am using the Hutson Inner Mermaid stamp and also the Avery L Mermaids for the sentiment. I am prepping another piece of Bristol cardstock, and I'm going to go ahead and ink up all of my images all at once with my VersaFine Nocturne ink. Once again, it's that sticky ink, will allow me to add some embossing powder. Once I have it all heat set, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim out my sentiment so that I don't accidentally color or get any color onto it. So I'm just going to pull out my cut-a-line. I am checking to see where I'm going to line up my slot. And once I get that figured out, I'm just going to line it up and just drag my craft blade down. I always like to use the 1/16 because I like my sentiment strips to be nice and narrow. And now I'm going to move on to my coloring. I've selected 2 shades of pink from the Arteza markers, and I'm starting off on the tail. What I'm doing is I'm adding the color to the very tips and the beginning of the tail so that I can just drag the color across with my water brush. You can use the lighter color to drag the color, but I wanted to see how intense the color would be on its own. And then I went ahead and added a little bit more with the second color. I still kind of didn't like how it was looking. I felt like it still needed a little bit more, so I brought in a little bit of red. You only need a tiny bit or else the red will overwhelm, but it does add a lot of depth to the image. And I'm just going to spread and drag that red across the tail. and I just keep messing with it until I'm happy. I'm not sure why I keep messing with it because it looks perfectly fine. Now I'm going to do the body of the mermaid, and I'm starting off with that darker pink, and I'm just going to drag the color across with my water brush. Once again, I just wanted to add some dimension. You don't really need to get all complicated. Just what pleases your eye is usually what I end up doing. I can usually look at an image and see, oh, I need something more here, something more there. And I felt like it needed still a little bit more color, so I added a tiny, tiny bit of red to the very edges, just the most minute amount. And then if you have too much color, you can use your water brush and just lift up that color, wipe it off onto a little cloth, and you can remove some of that color. And here I'm just dampening the image, and I'm just using the cloth to pick up some color just so that I can get that little highlight back. Once it's all done, I went ahead and added some Wink of Stella. Here I'm removing some color where I went outside of the line, but I did add some Wink of Stella to make it all shiny. Now to add my sentiment, I am using a stamp set from Lawn Fawn. It's called A Birdie Told Me, and I have the coordinating stamps. For the inside of the speech bubble, I am using the Hero Arts Mermaid Kisses. I just liked the sentiment, but the speech bubble is going the wrong way, so I'm going to show you how I fix that problem. So first, I'm going to stamp the sentiment onto the scrap paper of the MISTI, and then I'm going to line up my speech bubble and stamp my sentiment. Now I'm heat embossing it with some clear embossing powder, but now this is the part where it's not really complicated, it's just an extra step. So I'm taking my So Suzy mirror image stamp, and I've placed it on the bottom of the MISTI. I've taken the foam insert out, and now I'm just using a black ink to stamp it onto the red rubber. I flipped my negative die cut around so that it would be in reverse, and I lined it up with the stamped image on the red rubber. Now I'm dropping in my, I'm going to drop in my die cut, but I want to make sure that the ink is damp on the red rubber, so I stamp it again with some pigment ink. It stays wet a little bit longer, so it works better. And now the image is reversed, so I want it a little bit darker, so I do it one more time, and I'm just going to drop that die cut right in there. You can rub your fingers on it, but you can also use the lid of the MISTI because the stamp will push down right where the paper is, and you get that reverse image. I'm going to assemble my card now, and I am using the ThermoWeb self-adhesive foam. It's pretty thin, so it doesn't add too much dimension, but it does give you a little bit, and it works well for die cutting. I decided that I wanted to add the little splash, and so I'm just going to stamp first. I'm going to die cut first and then stamp. So I have stamped the image onto some scrap paper, and now I'm lining up my die cut. I am going to be using embossing powder, so I will prep my cardstock with the anti-static tool. And once that's done, I'll go ahead and heat emboss that. And because it is a freestanding image, I went ahead and just used my craft pick to hold down the die while I heat emboss it. To add the die cut, I just used some liquid adhesive, and as you all know, I have a piece of metal underneath my craft mat, so I can use my magnet to hold my die cut in place. For the other card, I am using that same foam from ThermoWeb, and I've clipped off the very tip of it because I want to be able to tuck this tail into the die cut. There is a small, tiny, perfect gap where the tail could go in, so it looks like the mermaid is splashing into the water. And I will go ahead and add all the other embellishments. So here are all the cards I made. I did try different color of mermaids. I did add some gems to it. I did add some Lucy Abram iridescent gems and some Studio Katia Midnight Blue. You can see that I did a blue mermaid. It kind of got lost in the background, but I didn't want to waste the mermaid, so I just went ahead and kept it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this longer video, and be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Have a great day.